My name is Carl Pendleton. I'm a police officer for the city of Norman, as you can see on your screens. I've lived here in the great city of Norman since June of 2003, so I consider myself a Normanite now. I came to the city of Norman when I was recruited to come play football here, as this picture that you will see on your screen will indicate. That is how I got stuck here. Yeah, that's kind of become part of my identity. It's kind of like just kind of my name now. Some people go to school for years and they become so-and-so PhD or so-and-so whatever, licensed clinical social worker. I am now forever former football player Carl Pendleton. It's just part of my name. That's just who I've become. And then a few years later, I had the great opportunity of just becoming, I signed my name on a dotted line, and I've another picture here where I became a police officer, and so now I am officer. Yeah, it was a great opportunity. I'm officer, former football player Carl Pendleton. Yes, there's lots of opportunities. But as you guys saw the first slide, I wanted to talk to you guys today about How's That Made? It's just that I love that show. Has anyone not seen that show, How's That Made? I feel so sorry for you if you've not seen that show, because I love that show. It's an incredible show. It's usually on one of those nerdy channels because I am a dork. My wife makes fun of me all the time because she'll come in and she's like, "Are you nerding out again?" And I'm like, "Yes, you're welcome." And How's That Made is the show when it talks about these different products that we use all the time. And I'm a little bit sad, emotional and a little sad. I was recently the victim of a crime. Someone broke into my laptop and they stole my Microsoft Office. And for, is this one working? All right, there we go. For law enforcement, we are specifically a little bit more susceptible to crime, and we are a little bit more emotional. So whoever stole my Microsoft Office, I will find them, and they will pay. You have my word. Someone's going to get that. Someone's going to get that. They have my word. Someone's going to get that. So, while we're talking about law enforcement, I think it's my responsibility to share some law enforcement tricks of the trade, some investigative tips I'll share with you guys. This one's for free. I'm just going to share this with you. Take it, hide in your back pocket for a little bit later. If you guys are ever stuck in a snowstorm and you guys are in law enforcement and you guys need to find Will Smith, you want to know how you find him? Look for the Fresh Prince. There you go. Boom. All right. So, I told you I'm a dork. All right. So, moving on. So looking back over my life, I had a chance to kind of really look at the opportunity to see where I am. And people always look at the finished product. That's really what we look for. And I love that show, How's It's Made. And that's really what it looks at. It looks at the fact that we are focused on the finished product, and we're consumers. That is exactly who we are as people. We look at the finished product. We love the finished product. We get on Amazon. We buy things on our cell phones. I love the Amazon app. I buy stuff. It shows up on my front doorstep. I'm a happy camper, right? That's what we do. But the finished product is what we focus on. But we very rarely take a little bit of time to look back at the process of how things are made. So looking back at the process, here's a picture. Creepy little sucker there. Yeah. So looking back, you're thinking, how old's that guy? Like 3, 4? I wasn't even a year old. I was a ginormous child. So looking back over the process, I was a happy little critter. And realistically, that took some time for me to build over the process. And we see the final product of wearing that Sooner uniform or wearing that police officer uniform, but getting to that point really took some development. And over the years in that process, we don't think about that process of that finished product. And that show really shows you what goes into it. It shows you the raw materials, it shows you how the conveyor belts go, and it shows you what they do and how they take the metal or they take the factory and the conveyor belts. And I love watching that. But we also forget about the fact that someone is operating that machinery. We forget about the fact that there's someone who's actually involved in that process, and there's someone who's actually taking the time to give us that finished product. Now, with my process, it wasn't as beautiful as that Sooner uniform would have us to believe at times. It's not as finished and polished as that command presence of a police officer uniform would have us to believe at times.
See, my process was a little bit darker. I grew up in a home with domestic violence, I grew up in a home with sexual assault, and my process was a little bit challenging for me. And it wasn't so simple. So for me, when I got to that point where I had a chance to move on and work hard, and I went into high school, another picture here, and behind those eyes, it wasn't as happy and it wasn't as excited as that first little guy. Because in between that first picture and that one, there was a lot that happened. Now that guy was pretty successful because I worked as hard as I possibly could. I got myself poured into every activity I possibly could be in, and I worked my butt off. But it wasn't so much just because I wanted to be a great person, it's because I could not stand the silence. I couldn't stand being still. Because the more still I was, the quieter it was. And the more quiet it was, the more I hurt, the more painful it was. So I poured myself into every activity I possibly could. Now the pain for me was actually really, really great because it pushed me to greatness. But more importantly, there were a few people who invested in me. And this is that part of the show, that How's That Made, that I love more than anything else. There's this narrator, and he starts telling people about the process. He's telling you how these things are made, but this is what I love to watch. There are people in the background who are actually making these things happen. There are people who are hammering out those raw materials, and I like the ones that have metal, because typically you have these nasty little balls of ugliness that go into these furnaces, and they come back out, and someone takes them and they start hammering them out, and they make them into these beautiful, useful objects. And the reality is that someone saw that raw material and they saw something better that was there. They saw a vision of what it could be. And regardless of what that raw material saw in itself, there was something more that was there. I didn't see it in myself, but someone did see it in me. Another picture here. I never believed in any imaginary possibility that I would stand before my graduating class in college and address my graduating class. But as a little guy, there were people that took an investment in me, and they took the time, they took their efforts, their resources, and they poured into me. They said, you can do better, you can be better, you can work harder, and you can overcome. There were people who got me involved in the Boys and Girls Club, started me playing football when I was in 5th grade, gave me an outlet, gave me a chance to improve my stock, to improve my lifestyle, to improve where I came from. They gave me a chance. They gave me an opportunity. People who saw the raw material, who saw the fact that if they just invested a little bit in me, I could be a little bit better. They saw a final product down that conveyor belt line that could be useful later on. Another slide. I didn't know what it was like to be a good father. I didn't know what it was like to be a husband. Because to me, a husband was being violent. A husband was a womanizer. My wife, she's smoking hot. She is. I got lucky. I really did. But I learned how to be a husband because I watched men who were good husbands. I watched men who invested in my life, who stood around and who just took the time to be around me and invest in me. See, that finished product that you're looking at right now, hopefully I'm not finished completely, but the product you're looking at now was part of a process because people like you took the time to invest in young men like me. They didn't have extraordinary talents all the time, but sometimes they just took the time to stand around and love their spouse, love their children, and they were a perfect example of what I needed to see to be better. I needed to see that example. One more picture here. And this is what really, really gets to me. And about a year ago, I had a wonderful opportunity to go on a call. So as my uniform changed, I stood in a living room last year, and I realized that just a couple of miles east of here, there's a place that's got a lot of concrete and a lot of steel doors, and there are people who wear different types of uniforms that had upbringings a lot like mine. And without having those investments, without having someone who invested in them, my reality could have ended up a lot like theirs. But I stood in the living room with a young lady where we were about to take her mother to jail. She was neglecting her children. And this little girl, knowing her mom was about to go to jail, she pulled me aside, pretty sad, because she knew mom was about to go to jail. But she took some string, took some beads, put this on my wrist. She said, "Thank you for taking care of me." She just thanked me, held my hand, and I stood there trying my best to not tear up, trying my hardest, because I remembered about 20 years before that, being that little boy in my living room, when deputies were standing in my living room taking me away from my family. But I remember people like you having the opportunity to make an investment. So I ask, when you wonder how's that made, it's because of you. The finished product that you're looking at, it's because of people like you taking the opportunity to make lives like mine better.